everyone. Good evening. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you guys are doing all fine. This is Trupti Sharma. On behalf of Time Mumbai, I would like to welcome you all, including our speaker for today, who is the subject expert, Veda. So just to keep the introduction extremely short, Veda is SME and startup business head for Razorpay. He has helped build and grow multiple digital products and brand across sectors. And he has been an expert speaker on the digital and the marketing front. We did a clubhouse session last Saturday, which was very well appreciated by people who joined in from UK as well as Australia. So without any further ado, over to you, Veda. Please take it ahead.
Thank you so much, Trupti. Thanks for those kind words. And very good evening to all of you folks who've joined. I'm assuming most of you are from India, which is why I'm saying good evening. I hope all of you are safe and sound. You're doing well health-wise. Your loved ones, your colleagues, your employees, your co-workers, everybody is safe and sound. We live in pretty crazy times. I hope all of you are safe and sound. Let me just take a moment to share my screen. Give me a quick second. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So over the next hour or so, this is what we're going to look at. So the structure that we could follow is we go through the presentation, which will go on for potentially an hour, 50 minutes to 60 minutes, and then we leave the last 30 to 45 minutes odd for Q&A. As and when the questions come to you, you can enter it in the chat window, or towards the end of the session, you could unmute and speak. Either of these work. Yeah. Over the next hour or so, what we're going to do is, we're going to start off by looking at, essentially, we're going to talk about what are some of the best practices that you can think of from a digital perspective for, across customer acquisition, retention, engagement. What are some of the practical rule books that you can employ in your everyday life as a business owner, as a startup founder, as an entrepreneur, which can help you drive growth for your business and help you acquire more customers, increase your revenue. So to begin with, what we'll do is I'll take you through some very interesting inflection points that happened during the year 2020, the year of the pandemic. And I'm not going to bore you with the usual well-publicized, well-known stats of India being amongst the world's largest and fastest growing digital economies. I'm going to talk about a couple of very interesting data points that kind of slip below the radar. Nobody actually took notice of this, but it has some pretty fundamental implications and ramifications for us as digital entrepreneurs. So I'm going to take you through that. And then I'll give you a sense of what have been some of the changes that we have seen across the startup ecosystem in India because of the pandemic itself. Some of the changes that we at Razorpay have had, the opportunity to have a ringside perspective of, because we process the entire cycle of money movement. I'll give you a quick sneak peek into what have been some of the changes that we've observed. And then we'll essentially, it's a conversation in two parts. We'll start off by looking at the acquisition side of things. So from an acquisition perspective, what are some of the best practices for you to follow? And more importantly, addressing the very important question of how to prioritize your efforts. So a question that I'm often asked, I serve as a mentor working with various startup acceleration programs, multiple TiE chapters, Head Start, Atal Innovation Mission, etc. And the question that I'm usually asked in every single of those conversations, which I have with an early stage entrepreneur founder, is all of this gyan is fine, Veda, but tell me for my dhanda, for my business, how do I prioritize my digital efforts? I'm not Amazon, I'm not Flipkart, I don't have infinite resources. Given that everything is finite for me, how do I prioritize for my business? So I'll give you some simple frameworks along with some examples on how you can go about prioritizing your digital marketing efforts and why. And then we'll shift tracks and focus more on engagement. So from a lead engagement perspective, what are some of the best practices for you to follow? Across both of these, I'll give you examples from both of my previous adventures, Healthify Me in the health tech space and Simply Learn in the edtech space. And then towards the end, we'll talk about a couple of topics, which are very close to my heart. One essentially is on the space of driving repeat dhanda for your business. How do you drive repeat business? I'll take you through a failure and a success story there. And then towards the end, we'll talk about at the most philosophical level possible, what are the various ways and means by which you can drive brand exposure for your business. That's something that we will look at towards the end. Yeah. Starting off, the inflection points that I spoke about. The first inflection point was this. In India, the terms Google search and the term search are all used almost synonymously. It's an almost complete and total and absolute monopoly of the market that Google has. Unlike a few other developed markets where there are other search engines as well, which have some kind of a market share, whereas in India, it's an absolute and total dominance. That changed in the year 2020 when for the first time ever, it was not Google search via the browser web, That was the number one numero uno logical entry point for Indians to discover www, the World Wide Web. But it was actually the Google search via the Play Store, which became the number one logical entry point for Indians looking to discover the World Wide Web. This has some pretty fundamental implications for all of you folks who are looking to build digital businesses. It means that the mobile app, especially if you're a B2C business, needs to be the front, middle, and center of your digital brand presence building anchors that you're looking to build. And it also has some pretty fundamental implications for digital marketers. It means that if you're a digital marketer, mobile marketing needs to be the fulcrum of your digital marketing strategy. Moving on, the second inflection point, again, a lot of people did not actually take notice of this, was this. Despite the exponential growth of digital in India over the last decade or so, it was this good old fashioned symbol, right? The good old fashioned television set, which was the number one reach building channel, marketing channel. When it comes to driving mass awareness in India. What you see here are the various phases that a brand goes through in a consumer psyche across its entire life cycle. A brand moves from awareness, where awareness is first seeded in the consumer's mind, before moving into consideration and evaluation. A long list of brands, right? Trupti is looking to evaluate a particular brand to purchase. Awareness is seeded about a particular brand. Then she begins to consider a long list of brands, evaluates a short list before making a purchase decision, which is the action towards a particular brand. Now, despite the growth of digital, it was television, which was the number one channel for driving mass awareness. That changed in the year 2020 when television became more of a brand reinforcement channel and moved a step further down in the life cycle. And all of these extremely popular digital platforms which need no introduction, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, they became the number one awareness building channels, which again has some pretty fundamental implications and talks about the kind of explosive growth that digital has seen in the last year. I often mention that it's been like we've been sitting inside a time capsule. And if not for the pandemic, the kind of growth that the country would have seen when it comes to embracing digital and digital payments, that might have happened over a 5-year horizon, that's actually happened in 1 year. And that's been so interesting and encouraging to observe. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend a few seconds in talking about the impact that we at Razorpay have seen across the entire startup ecosystem because of the pandemic. We often think of ourselves at Razorpay as an index fund that sits on top of the entire startup and SME community in the country, because we process the entire cycle of money movement across both the inward money movement cycle, where the startups receive funds from their end customers through our payment gateway, payment link, payment page products, and the outward money movement cycle through our suite of business banking solutions, which is the Razorpay X platform, where businesses can pay out funds to their raw material suppliers, vendor partners, employee payroll, etc. And we have seen a huge growth of obviously e-com and D2C brands. Direct to consumer brands have really grown. For example, we have this partnership going on with Amazon at Razorpay, wherein we provide bespoke exclusive offerings for all of their sellers. All of their sellers are selling on Amazon India and they make good money, good revenues. But despite that, all of them have aspirations to build their own. All of them have aspirations to build their own digital brand presence. They want to have their own website. They want to build a D2C brand. They want to build their own digital brand and control the entire customer life cycle. Which is extreme, right from marketing right down to fulfillment, and which again has been extremely interesting. Huge growth of D2C. We've also seen a huge growth of edtech, health tech, gaming sectors, which is again intuitive because people are stuck at home because of the pandemic. They need ways and means to upskill, reskill themselves, which explains the growth of edtech. They are stuck at home. They need ways and means to discover healthier and fitter versions of themselves, which explains the growth of health tech. Gaming, again, they need to be entertained. We've seen growth across all of these sectors. And one very interesting change that we've observed is that the persona of the average digital entrepreneur of 2021 is fundamentally different from the demographic makeup and the mental makeup of the digital entrepreneur from 2014. They are not like Sachin and Binny Bansal of 2014 or Harshil Mathur and Shashank Kumar, Razorpay's founders of 2014, who understood both the importance of digital and the nitty-gritties and the nuts and bolts and the inner workings of the technology powering that digital product. The new age digital entrepreneur understands the importance of digital, but they don't understand the nuts and bolts, the technology that goes behind the digital platform, nor do they want to. They don't care about it. They want that level of complexity abstracted away from them. They want to focus on doing what they do best, which is running their business. They don't want to bother about all of these complications, which explains the growth of a lot of what we at Razorpay call #no-code products, like a payment link, a payment page, etc., which doesn't have any hassle of quote-unquote integration. You don't need the luxury of having a developer. You can start using these products and start receiving payments in under 5 minutes through a click drag and drop interface, completely non-tech, which essentially has democratized access to digital payments. It was earlier very elitist. It's become a lot more massy now. Anybody can start using digital payments. And we've seen this huge growth from the market as well. The other huge growth is we've seen a huge boom from tier 2, tier 3 and below, which again has been extremely interesting. It's not just about Mumbai. I know I'm speaking at time Mumbai, but it's not just about Mumbai or Bangalore or Chennai or Hyderabad or Delhi. A lot of people from tier 2, tier 3 and below are starting up. They're building their own small businesses and they're servicing the local economies there as well. And the other interesting trend that we observed is that local vernacular is becoming more important than ever before. More than half of Razorpay's SME sales team's conversations today are not in English. And which goes to show, which again is a proof and a testament to the point that local vernacular is here to stay, and more and more masses of India are actually moving towards embracing digital payments, digital and entrepreneurship in general, which has been extremely interesting. Moving on, as I said, and we've observed these kinds of winds of change across, the entire life cycle, entire payment life cycle, across both the inward money movement cycle, where the businesses receive funds from their end customers, and the outward money movement cycle, where the businesses pay out funds. As I said earlier, the pandemic has, brought digital to the forefront like never before. But the help that a lot of entrepreneurs need is with prioritization. If Trupti is an entrepreneur, what she's telling me is, Veda, all of this gyan is fine. I run a small business. And everything works from a customer acquisition perspective. When you're looking to acquire new customers, we'll talk about what are some of the simple rules of thumb or the frameworks that you can employ in your organization to know what needs to be your number one focus. And I'm sure most of you here are aware of what these terms mean, but for the uninitiated, let me spend 30 seconds in giving you a quick crash course on what each of these mean. I'm sure Facebook and LinkedIn advertising needs no introduction, but SEM and SEO, let me just quickly explain. Let's say Trupti, there is no pandemic in India, and Trupti is planning a holiday in Lonavala, right? And she's searching for resorts in Lonavala. Yeah. And every time a search happens on Google, what happens is a real-time virtual auction actually happens. Very similar to an auction in a real world. Let's say I'm looking to auction this OnePlus phone, right? You've got various people, bidding various rates for that particular product. When somebody enters a keyword on Google and presses enter, a real-time auction actually happens. And what happens is that just like you've got various people bidding various rates, in this case, you've got various advertisers bidding various prices for the right to serve their advertisement in the first slot for that particular user search query. Now, in this case, let's say that Make My Trip is bid on this keyword. For example, they've bid 100 rupees for this keyword, and say Booking.com is bid, say 200 rupees for this keyword, resorts in Lonavala. Now, because for the most part, who comes up on top is determined by who bids the highest. So Booking.com, because they bid higher than Make My Trip, their ad comes up on top. So Trupti would see a bunch of search results. First few results would say ad against them. So if Trupti were to click on the Booking.com ad, Booking.com would be charged 200 rupees by Google, which is called CPC, cost per click advertising. Now, all of the efforts that you as a marketer, as an entrepreneur undertake to make sure that your ad comes up on top for relevant user search queries is referred to as SEM, search engine marketing. And Google provides a platform called as the Google AdWords platform, using which you can actually run and set up these advertisements. Now, that is SEM, which is paid for, as I just mentioned, right? It is paid marketing. Now, let's say that Trupti were to scroll a little further down on the same page, you would see a bunch of listings which do not have the ad tag listed against them, right? These are called organic listings. These are based purely on merit. This has got nothing to do with who has bid the highest. It's purely based on merit. Now, this is based on Google's organic search ranking algorithms decision of whose landing page or whose website has the freshest content, the most relevant content to the user search query, has the best user experience, is optimized for mobile viewing, especially if the search query is happening on mobile, has the maximum number of backlinks from other authoritative domain sources based on a variety of these parameters which Google's algorithm takes into account. Google decide which link needs to come up on top. Now, let's say that Trupti sees a particular link of Make My Trip. She were to click on it. Make My Trip is not going to be charged any money because this is organic. There is no cost attached. It's free. There is no cost per click cost attached. Now, that all of the efforts that you as an entrepreneur, as a marketer undertake to make sure that your website, your landing pages, are given the best possible chance through relevant, fresh content, good user experience, etc., to bubble up higher and higher on Google's organic search ranking algorithm is referred to as SEO, search engine optimization. Yeah, just to spend a couple of minutes on the topic of SEO itself. A lot of people, when they are in their early days, they are looking to build a digital business. When they are looking to grow, they think often of spending money. How much should I spend? Right, and which is like a typical question that I'm often asked. I just want to take a moment to talk about the impact that you can actually drive and the kind of scalable businesses that you can actually build just by focusing on content and SEO. I want to give you a couple of examples to underscore my point. Both of these, I mean, it will be slow wins. It will take time. It is hard work. It is grunt work. There is no shortcut, but you can build scalable businesses without spending a lot of money, right? Just by focusing on content and SEO. I want to give you two examples. The first one is, I'm not sure how many of you remember this name. It's a brand name called Thrilophilia. Not sure how many of you have heard of this name. I used to be in travel tech before in one of my earlier lives. And travel tech, as most of you know, especially more so pre-pandemic, it's an extremely competitive space. You've got a lot of global biggies who operate there, Booking.com, Ibibo Group, etc. A lot of homegrown players with very deep pockets. Cleartrip, Make My Trip. I know there have been some acquisitions, mergers, etc. But at least a few years back, you had all of these players in, and then you got, of course, Oyo Rooms. I know my own alma mater, Stazilla, etc. You had a lot of these homegrown players with a lot of VC funds. Right, they had all of these guys had money to spend. Now, despite all of these players being in there was this bootstrapped small startup which had not raised anything, $1 in VC funding, which used to beat everybody else when it came to SEO, which was this company called Thrilophilia, because they focus specifically on long tail keywords and keywords that were more around holidays and experiences and not so much around hotel booking. And because their focus, they didn't have any money to spend on marketing, so their only and sole focus was on SEO and content, and they used to beat everybody else. Which goes to show that this has got nothing to do with money, who spends the most on Google. This is a pure merit-based system. It's a complete and total meritocracy. So I know that I just wanted to give you that example. There is another example which I want to talk about, which is a company called Practo, which I'm sure most of you have heard of, India's largest online doctors marketplace. And they get around 25 to 30 million visits every month. 90% of that is organic. It comes through SEO. They don't pay for it. They've done such a fantastic job of SEO, and look at the kind of business they built. Of course, they had first mover advantage, but look at the kind of business they built. Just to give you a sense of how good their SEO is, let's say Trupti is a gynecologist who lives in South Mumbai. Yeah, and she has her own practice. She accepts bookings from her own website. I search for Dr. Trupti in, say, Bandra, or say in Nariman Point, right? She's in South Mumbai, and but Trupti is also listed on Practo, and she has her own listing there. In all likelihood, even above her own website listing, her listing on Practo would come up higher, right? And would end up booking her appointment on Practo and end up paying, and she would end up paying a commission to Practo for the lead that Practo just drove her. So I just wanted to give you both of these examples to give you a sense of the kind of scalable businesses that you can build without actually spending money, by just focusing on content and SEO. Yeah. Now, coming back to the problem at hand, how do you prioritize? Right, all of this is fine, but how do I know for my business? I run an online education company. I do B2B selling to schools. I sell online mental wellness programs. I sell t-shirts online, for example. It could be anything. How do I know for my business what needs to be my focus? So the first question you ask yourself in an attempt to answer this question is, you ask yourself the question, the product or the space or the category that I'm operating in, is that mass or is that niche? That's the first question you ask yourself. Now, there are a couple of ways in which you can answer this. Let's say Trupti is asking herself this question. Trupti, I apologize, I'm taking your example again and again. Let's say Trupti asks herself this question. There are two ways in which she can go about finding the answer to this, right? The first is her own entrepreneur's gut-based instinct that tells her that, you know what, I sell t-shirts online, I'm probably mass. I sell mental wellness courses online, I'm probably niche, right? That is one subjective way. The other objective way, in order to validate or challenge this original subjective hypothesis, is to use data and to open up again the good old Google AdWords platform. And within that, you have a tool called the Keyword Planner. Open that up and look at the kind of monthly keyword search volumes that are there for the particular keyword or the category that you're operating in. Now, it's not a perfect science, and it is a grayscale. It's not a spectrum. It's not a, it's not a binary. But if your target market is, say, India, or a country which has the kind of internet population size that India has, if the monthly search volumes for core keywords related to your category. So the keyword planner gives you a sense of how many people or how many keyword searches happen for that particular keyword. So if I enter online t-shirts, I'll get to know every month in India, if India is the country that I have chosen on the keyword planner, how many searches happen? What is the volume of searches which happen for that particular keyword? Now, if the monthly search volumes are above 20,000 searches in a given month, you can assume that the category that you're operating in to be fairly mass. If it is less than that, you can assume it to be niche for a country which has the kind of internet population size that India has. Now, what do you do if you're mass? Let's assume you're mass, right? Trupti is operating in a space which is fairly massy. That means that there is already existing user demand behavior patterns already there on Google search. It's already manifesting on Google search. Now, not all of us can be Amazon or Flipkart. We may not be able to create new user behaviors. But what we can very well do is we can piggyback on existing user behavior patterns that are already there on Google search. So there are already people searching for keywords which are related to my category, and a large volume of people. I'm already operating in a space where behavior is set. So I should ride that wave. It's just commonsensical. So I should make Google my number one priority, combination of both SEO and SEM if I'm mass. Yeah. Now, what happens if I'm not so lucky, right? Trupti says, that's fine, but I'm not that lucky. I'm operating in a niche space. What does she do? She doesn't directly run into Facebook's arms, right? She asks herself an additional question. The space that I'm operating in, does that give me the opportunity to strike a very strong personal connect, an emotional bond with my end customers? Does it give me the opportunity to answer to that is yes, then she needs to make Facebook her focus. I'll give you an example of this. When I first joined Healthify Me, and Healthify Me, for those of you who are unaware, it happens to be India's leading, health and fitness mobile application with over 25 million users. It's a freemium mobile app, which means there are certain, features which are free, certain that are paid for. The free services involve, a calorie counting service. It has the world's largest database of Indian foods that are mapped to accurate calorie breakdowns. So if Trupti has had some exotic food from Assam, Mizoram, Kashmir, Kanyakumari, Lakshadweep, Mandaman, Daman, Diu, Gujarat, doesn't matter. All of those will have accurate calorie breakdowns. She can know exactly how many calories she's consumed, how many carbs, protein, vitamins, etc. Plus, let's say Trupti has gone for a 10-kilometer jog today morning. She can get to know how many calories she's burnt, water intake, all of that. So it's like a daily diary, which makes Trupti a lot more mindful of her eating habits, workout patterns, etc. Now, that's a free service. The premium service involves creating personalized diet, fitness, and yoga plans for users based on their health goals. Now that's about Healthify Me. Now, when I first joined Healthify Me, I had a huge culture shock because for the first time in my life, Facebook was the number one dhanda driver. It was the number one breadwinner, right? And it was driving attributable ROI and customer acquisitions, even more so than Google. In all of my previous experiences, it was Google search, which was the leader, but here it was not so, which was a huge culture shock for me. And that was because Healthify Me was operating in the space of weight loss. It was enabling a 40-something, a 40-plus middle-aged working professional who's gotten a beer belly, hypertension, diabetes because of a sedentary lifestyle, overcome that excess body weight and lose 10 kilograms. It was enabling a 30-something young mother who has put on a lot of, post-pregnancy body fat, and lost confidence, helps her rediscover her older confident self by losing weight. It helps a 20-something young man muzzle up and gain a six-pack ab before Valentine's Day, right? It helps. It's about weight loss. It's about health, which is as close to the identity of an individual as it can get. So you have the opportunity to strike a very strong emotional chord. Plus, all of the communication that we did was video-led, testimonial-led, where we had our customers come forward with authentic retellings of the kind of life transformation that they've seen after having used the product. All of this works really well on Facebook, right? Check. Right? High emotional connect, videos, testimonials, empathy-driven communication, etc. Which was the reason why, Healthify Me, Facebook was the number one driver. So if you're operating in a niche space, which doesn't have a lot of set behavior patterns on Google, but you're high on all of these, you can use Facebook, right? And this Facebook works particularly well if you're operating in the space of proactive health tech, the space that a Healthify Me or a Cult Fit operate in, or, fashion tech, the space that a Myntra or a Nykaa operate in, right? In all of these cases, Facebook would work really well. Of course, if you're a B2B company, right, and there are some nuances to this. If you're operating in the B2B space, and if you are selling to in your target companies, the key decision makers and the influencers for that decision, if they are white collar working professionals, fairly active on LinkedIn, then you can make LinkedIn your focus. For example, at Healthify Me, again, we also had a B2B business. and we used to sell corporate wellness, employee wellness programs to a lot of large business houses in the country. So the CHRO, directors of HR and above, they were the key decision makers. And all of these guys are, fairly active on LinkedIn, which is why LinkedIn was the #1 acquisition source for the B2B business. But you won't always be that lucky. For example, if you are selling to schools, for example, I get this a lot, that a lot of these startups sell to schools. So in that case, maybe digital is not the answer, because not a lot of school principals are on LinkedIn. Of course, you can still use YouTube and Facebook, but given the fact that you're going after such a small niche segment, such a massive platform like a Facebook or a YouTube may not really work. Yeah, so you've got to, maybe digital is not even the answer in such cases, and you focus on, more high touch acquisition, like, event-led acquisition or channel partnerships. That is something which is possible. As I said, right, digital is not always the answer. It doesn't always have to be the answer. The other kind of question that I'm often asked is, I see a lot of these startups that sell to rural, geographies. They sell to villages, they sell to farmers, etc. And the question that I'm often asked is, how do you go about acquiring customers? How do you go about communicating to them? I have two answers for them. One is local vernacular from a messaging perspective. Second is a combination of both YouTube and Facebook. All of these people are on YouTube and Facebook. You've got to get your targeting right. If you have to use digital, if you've got the money to spend, right, do that. Try to build a community on Facebook and on YouTube. That is something which you can certainly do, leveraging, local vernacular, providing a lot of informational content. It just doesn't have to be sales. Just doesn't have to be sales led, just to build that level of trust with your end customer. And the other thing which is very important, not just if you're going after, say, schools, and if you're a B2B business, even if you're going after farmers, is channel partnerships. Try to see if you can bundle your offerings with other players who already have their networks in this particular ecosystem, who already have a network of schools, or who are already selling to a lot of farmers, if you're selling to the rural economy, right? And if you can bundle your products through a revenue share model, right, those would be my recommendations. If you're selling to, people who are slightly more digital illiterate, right? A very niche community like, say, school principals, or a very mass community like, say, people living in rural India. Moving on, going back to our earlier train of thought, Trupti says, I'm not that lucky, right? I'm neither mass, nor am I niche and have a high personal connect. I am niche and I have low on personal connect. What do I do? It's like a double whammy, right? And this is still possible, right? For example, at Razorpay, we have a very similar problem. We are niche. We are a B2B payments company. We're not a peer-to-peer payments company. We're not Google Pay. We're not Phone Pay. We're not Paytm. We enable businesses to receive funds and to send funds out in a very seamless, easy fashion. To receive funds from their customers and send funds to their vendor partners. So not a lot of people are searching for us on Google. So it's niche. Plus, it's a double whammy. We sell to primarily entrepreneurs and SMEs and startups and businesses. And let's face it, right? A business owner doesn't get up in the morning and get excited about the fact that they're going to start using a payments product, right? That's just the nature of the category itself. There's no point in me taking it personally. So it is a double whammy. It is niche and it is low on personal connect. So what do you do then? What you do is you go back to Google and you focus not just on your core dhanda relevant keywords, like, say, payment gateway, B2B payments, etc., which are still relevant for your business, but the search volume there is very limited because I'm operating in a very niche space. My sandbox is very limited. I also focus on those keywords which, even if not immediately relevant to my business, is still relevant for my target customer. Who's my target customer? It is people like you, right? Entrepreneurs, SME business owners. So I create content not just related to payments, but I create content related to, something like how to use digital marketing for growing your business. How do you read a P&L and a balance sheet as a first-time entrepreneur? How do you, navigate the GST compliance maze? Questions like these, right? Which have much higher keyword demand volume. So it gives my brand opportunity to gain exposed to a larger universe set, a larger eyeball universe. What is the relevance of these keywords to my business, to Razorpay's business? Not so much, but it is still very relevant for my end customer. So it gives me an opportunity to gain access to that customer during that moment of truth. And there are more people searching for these keywords than core payment keywords. So I get them in as part of my funnel, engage, nurture them over a period of time, and then convert them into paying customers. Yeah. Now, moving on, just a quick sneak peek into what were some of the things we did from a mobile marketing perspective at Healthify.me. As I said, Facebook, for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, was the #1 dhanda driver, ROI driver from an acquisition perspective. What we also did was Google came a close second after a while, and I talked to you about the interesting journey that it actually went through. Google, almost 4 or 5 years ago, launched something called as the Universal App Campaign, UAC, which was essentially the only de facto way in which you could actually run mobile marketing, app install campaigns, which was pretty interesting. And when it was first launched, a lot of marketers, digital marketers, advertisers hated this. because you had to give up a lot of control. Essentially, you had to say, in Google Baba, we trust, and you had to step aside. And digital marketers were used to having a lot of control. And people hated actually giving up control. And because as part of the new UAC construct, you could define, you needed to give Google your iTunes listing, your your Play Store listing, creatives, landing pages, content, and Google would decide whom to serve the ad to, when and where. You could of course define your sandbox. You could say your targeting is India, etc. But beyond that, you had very limited control. So when we first launched UAC campaigns, the results were pretty poor. It was extremely underwhelming. And it was a distant second to Facebook. But what we did a good job of was instrumenting something called as the Google Pixel, which is a piece of JavaScript code which you can implement, as part of your front-end code, which executes every time a page loads, every time an event happens, and sends information back to Google. We did a really good job of this across the entire life cycle of engagement of a user. That sounds pretty complicated. Let me try to simplify that with an example. Trupti, I want to take your example again, if you don't mind. Let's say Trupti downloads a Healthify app, she installs it, she registers on the Healthify app. Yeah, and she has just completed an upstream life cycle event on the Healthify app, right? Because it's fairly early on in her life cycle of engagement with Healthify. Now that's the Google Pixel sends this information back into the Google ecosystem, completely anonymized and aggregated. No personally identifiable data is sent out. Trupti's name, email, phone number, etc. is not shared. Right? Information about Trupti's digital Janam Kundali, her digital footprint is, Trupti continues to engage with the app. She consumes content on the app. She picks up a 7-day free trial, free diet consultation, etc. Midstream life cycle events, again, information sent back. Trupti eventually purchases a 6-month yoga plan, right, which is a downstream event, a life cycle event, which again, that information is sent back. Now, what I tell Google is that, listen, I like Trupti, go find me 100 more clones of her. Go find me 100 more clones of Trupti. That's what I tell Google. Now, the term machine learning, artificial intelligence is fairly abused today, but Google really does have an artificial intelligence powered machine learning algorithm, which goes and tries to find more clones who have the same kind of digital footprints, digital Janam Kundali as Trupti, who have the same kind of demographic, psychographic, behavioral attributes as Trupti. Right? It goes tries to find more of these clones, and the Google's algorithms accuracy and its ability to find more of these clones will be fairly limited because it has a limited data set to play with when you send this information of just say a couple of Truptis. So, but what we did was we persisted with this, and over 3 successive quarters, we didn't send Google information of just one Trupti, but we sent Google information of 100 Truptis and asked it to go find the next 10,000 of them. So Google's accuracy improved, and by doing this over 3 successive quarters, it became a very close second to Facebook. This is what I popularly refer to as inside-out targeting. The traditional form of targeting is outside in, wherein you as a marketer or as an entrepreneur, sit in your, tower and you decide who your ideal customer persona is. And then you define your marketing campaigns to go after that persona, right? Whereas in this case, you are letting data and you're letting user behavior on your platform actually determine who your ideal customer persona is. That's what we did here, for example, at Healthify, which can potentially, challenge your original hypothesis. So for example, when we first launched Healthify Me, we thought the millennial was our ideal customer persona. Turns out it wasn't. It was actually people who are older than the millennial age bracket, right? People like me who are older, less fit, more prone to lifestyle conditions, and who also had the greater ability to pay. They were the people who actually ended up converting more. And that was a big eye opener for us. Some of the other things that we did, was obviously App Store optimization. You can think of ASO or App Store optimization as SEO, search engine optimization's cousin, but for the App Store world. So all of the efforts that you undertake to make sure that your app's listing on iTunes and on the Play Store comes up higher and higher for relevant user search queries. That is referred to as ASO, App Store optimization. And the other thing that we also did was we did a really good job of in-app marketing. Targeting specific user cohorts with specific in-app marketing interventions. And we used to do this by creating something called as a lead score, which essentially was a numeric number on a scale of 0 to 100. Higher the number, greater their probability of conversion, of becoming a paying customer. So our historical data showed us that people from tier 1 cities, they converted better at Healthify Me in becoming premium customers, paying customers, than people from tier 2. People using an iPhone, they had greater ability to convert than people using an Android. People who had some kind of a pre-existing lifestyle condition, like a diabetes or a hypertension, they had a greater ability to convert than people who did not. So using a combination of parameters like these, we created essentially a blended lead score. And we used to target the top lead score cohorts with specific in-app marketing interventions. Trupti, are you interested in a free diet consultation? 1 hour, no strings attached consultation with my top nutritionist. Tanveen, are you interested in possibly picking up a 7-day free trial, right? Interventions like these, which is in-app marketing. We did a lot of email marketing. I'll, more on that when we get into the Simply Learn example. We also did a very good job of something called as AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages, which essentially is like a simple hygiene fix, which you need to, implement an infrastructural code tweak. You need to make your mobile website's code to make sure that your mobile website loads really quickly. Latency is very low, which is very important from a mobile SEO ranking perspective. Yeah. Shifting and just a quick sense, as I mentioned earlier, we did a lot of corporate wellness programs in Latify Me. And one of the big learnings there, and I know a lot of you here are B2B businesses, I just want to spend a few seconds in talking about some best practices when it comes to LinkedIn lead generation. So a lot of B2B businesses which are selling to technology savvy companies or companies where the key decision makers, influencers are on LinkedIn, they use LinkedIn lead generation forms a lot. And one mistake that I often see a lot of people making is when they are generating leads via LinkedIn, they optimize only for form fill, LinkedIn form fill, but don't optimize for intent. Let me give you an example. In Healthify Me, we used to generate leads of a lot of directors of HR, CHROs, who are the key decision makers, or CXOs, right? Even if they are outside of HR, because they have the ability to influence decision. I used to generate that via LinkedIn. Let's say Trupti is the CHRO of Ashok Leyland, and she has seen my LinkedIn advertisement. She fills in her form, right? And the way LinkedIn lead gen form works is that everything is defaulted. Trupti's name is pulled from her LinkedIn profile, email, phone number, everything is pulled from her LinkedIn profile. All Trupti has to do is click the submit button. So when my salesperson calls Trupti, Trupti has no recollection of having ever filled that form. She's a busy lady. She's an extremely senior working professional. She doesn't recollect having ever filled this form. That's because what's happened there is something which is popularly referred to as fat finger syndrome, right? Because everything is defaulted. All the user has to do is click the button. So it optimizes for form fill, yes, but it doesn't really optimize for intent. Trupti has no intent. Right? When the salesperson calls Trupti, she has no intention in scanning the conversation further, which is why what we did was we artificially injected some friction into the entire process, wherein we introduced a text box, which we said is a mandatory text box, which needs to be filled out mandatorily. And wherein we asked Trupti, right, in 50 words or more, Trupti, help us understand what is your expectation from the corporate wellness program, right, at Ashok Leyland. So Trupti is now forced to think. She spends a few seconds in thinking about her response and then in articulating her response in that text box. So, because of the fact that her neural synapses have been exercised in actually putting that answer out, when my salesperson actually calls, they're able to have a better conversation because Trupti is having higher intent. This drops conversion, yes. In our case, it dropped conversion by 30%, but intent improved by 100%. So net, we were positive. So that's something which is very important. I wanted to mention that, especially if you're a B2B business, optimize not just for form fill and form conversion, also optimize for intent. Yeah. Now moving on, we're going to shift tracks. So far, we've spent a lot of time in focusing and talking about, let me do a quick time check. I think we're doing okay. Customer acquisition. From an engagement and nurture perspective, what are some of the best practices? Engagement and nurture is about working with people who have already some kind of an affinity towards your brand, who already have got associated with your brand, who already entered your funnel. What is your marketing funnel? This is your marketing funnel. You've got traffic on top or app installs on top. You've got leads in the middle, people who have given you your name, email ID, phone number, so to speak. That's a lead. You've got paying customers at the bottom. We call it a funnel because people keep dropping off at various points in the funnel, right? That's why it's called a funnel. Now, shifting tracks and focusing on engagement and nurturing, all of the efforts that you undertake to make sure that you're able to convert more people who have already entered your funnel. So far, we were focusing on getting new people into your funnel. Working with people who have already entered your funnel to make them convert is referred to as engagement and nurturing. I'm just going to give you a sense of some of the best practices that we did at Simply Learn, which I believe is one of the best examples of engagement and nurture out there in the world, or at least in India. And I wanted to take you through, what were some of the things that we did. I'm going to again give you a simplified example. Let's say that Trupti has signed up on Simply Learn as a lead, and she's interested in, purchasing the digital marketing program. On the first day she signs up, she would get a communication that says, "Congratulations, Trupti, welcome to the digital marketing program, etc., etc." That communication she would get. A few days after that, she would get some communication that says, "Here are some of the latest and greatest blogs on digital marketing, Trupti, that you might be interested in." Right. A few days after that, she gets communication which lists testimonials of people just like herself who have advanced in their careers after having taken this program. A few days after that, Trupti gets an invitation to a webinar just like this one, conducted by an industry expert, just for her to gain more trust and credibility towards the brand. A few days after that, notice in all of the communication so far, which is across channels, email, SMS, WhatsApp, browser notifications, Trupti has not received one sales pitch. Everything is about adding value. Everything is about providing information to her. Right now on day 18, the brand moves in for the kill. It goes in for the slam dunk, wherein the brand gives Trupti a 20% discount code that expires in 48 hours. Buy now. Right? What you see here is the classic drip, as it's called, drip strategy that most brands employ when it comes to engagement and nurturing. We call it drip because it's very similar to water dripping off a tap, one after another. This is like communications going out one after another. Yep. And that as a marketer, as a business owner, you have the opportunity to sit in the back end and orchestrate all of these different communications. You can set up rules through a system which says that this communication needs to go out to Trupti on this day, this communication needs to go out to Aniket on this day. You can define all these rules and templates, right? And all of these can be set up through something called as a marketing automation platform across channels, email, SMS, WhatsApp, browser notifications, etc. Now, I've given here some of the most popular names when it comes to marketing automation platforms. HubSpot, of course, the world's leader. There is Marketo, there is Acton, which are some of the world's most popular platforms, marketing automation platforms. Salesforce, of course, world's leading CRM platform, also has a marketing automation module. But the bad news is that most of these are unaffordably and prohibitively expensive. And really not affordable for early stage startups, especially if you're bootstrap and if you're low on scale. Giving you here some more value for money, suggestions, which you as an early stage startup founder can use. Active Campaigns and some 3 Indian names here. Freshmarks has a product called Fresh Marketer. There is of course Zoho, and there is good old WebEngage, which is a Mumbai-based startup. The other 2 guys are, one is Chennai and one is, both of these guys are Chennai-based actually. And 3 Indian names and 1 global name. And you can certainly use all of these marketing automation platforms till your sending list size is, sub 100,000, because their feature set is fairly rich and it's extremely value for money, especially if you're an early stage startup. Now you can use engagement and nurturing in a few different ways. The first is as part of the transaction lifecycle itself. Just like in the Simplilearn example, where Simplilearn engaged and nurtured Trupti into becoming a paying customer during the sales lifecycle. You can use point number 1 in cases where you're playing a test match. If I were to take a cricket analogy, where you've got the luxury of time at your disposal, where the sales life cycles are fairly long. What is the sales life cycle? It's the average time it takes for a lead to become a paying customer. In Simplilearn's case, we know using historical data that a lead on an average takes approximately 4 weeks to become a paying customer, right? So we know that we've got the luxury of time. Trupti is not going to run away anywhere. So I can engage and nurture her over the sales life cycle. That's a luxury that I have. Now, what happens if I am, say, Domino's Pizza, right? I need to, where my sales life cycle is 5 minutes, or I make my trip for flights where sales life cycle is maybe 30 minutes. People are in a hurry. I'm playing a T20 match. I don't have the luxury of time. I can't build an innings. Right? I don't have the luxury of time to engage and nurture Trupti, right? Trupti is going to go to my competitor already. So that transaction is gone. I can't do much about that transaction. I can't influence that transaction. But what I can do is, I know that Trupti is a vegetarian. She likes paneer toppings. I keep sending her regular reminders on my latest and greatest paneer topped vegetarian pizzas. So that the next time she's feeling hungry, she's feeling lazy, she wants to order pizza home, Domino's is top of mind. So I can use engagement and nurturing to drive repeat behavior, stickiness, brand loyalty. The third use case, of course, is in refunneling users. I spoke about the funnel. You've got various people who drop out of the funnel, who don't convert. How do you put them back into the funnel? For example, at Simplilearn, we had this concept of dead leads and a dead lead drip, right? People who did not convert. So we used to go after them every 6 months to try and put them back in. And Health Family, we had a lot of these users who are hibernating users, inactive. They had the app on their phone, but they've forgotten about it. I used to get them to, we used to get them to relaunch the app through Instagram Lives, which was a piece of live content that worked really well. That was streamed live on the app. And, that was a great way, where you have a nutritionist talking about dangers of crash dieting, advantages of keto diet, advantages of vegan dieting, etc. That was a great way for us to reactivate all of these hibernating cohorts. And I know that most of you here are CEOs, business owners, and, you don't enjoy marketing jargon as much as Dhande Wali terms, right? Like top line and bottom line. So if you were to try and understand, in pure business words, why do you need engagement and nurturing? I can give you 2 strong reasons. The first one is that your sales team is going to be a lot more productive. I don't know about you folks, but all of the CEOs and the business owners that I worked with, they always like the sales team a lot more than the marketing team, right? They always saw the sales folks as the people who ended up bringing in money for them, and the marketers as the people who ended up spending their money. And through engagement and nurturing, you can make your sales team more effective. How? Let's try and understand that with a simple example. Let's say Trupti runs a company which has a 5-member inside sales team. Each of them can make 20 calls a day. They work for 20 days a month. So her team can get in touch with approximately 2,000 prospects in a given month. But let's say her pipeline is 10,000 strong. How does her team decide which are the top 2,000 to call from the 10,000 folks? Right? They might be using something unscientific like a first in, first out, or a last in, first out. Right? So which is where the power of technology, power of marketing automation, engagement and nurture comes in, wherein Trupti's marketing team can send communication out across channels to all of these 10,000 folks. There is no human bandwidth constraint. And basis the kind of engagement that these, the entire prospect universe exhibits to the communication that is sent out, a lead scoring algorithm can work. How many of them opened my emails? How many of them clicked on my emails? How many of them registered and attended a webinar? How many of them visited my pricing page? Basis signals like these, Trupti can again create a lead score, which is the numeric number between 0 to 100 that I mentioned in the Healthify.me example. Now, all Trupti's sales team now needs to do is to sort the 10,000 folks in descending order of lead score and call the top 2,000. It's as simple as that. And which means that her sales team is a lot happier. They are more productive. And if the sales team is more productive, you obviously make more money. It improves your top line. The other advantage of this is that Trupti's sales team is not getting in touch with the remaining 8,000 folks who are not quite ready to make a purchase decision yet. So they're not spam calling any of them. So Trupti's brand equity is also not being eroded. The second reason why you should consider engagement nurturing is this, and I cannot stress this enough. All of these engagement and nurture marketing automation platforms are by a factor of 10,000 and above more cost effective than other engagement, CPC, cost per click, or CPM, cost per 1,000 impression based remarketing platforms, engagement and nurture platforms like Google, Facebook, and other platforms. Which means that for the same marketing spend, you get to acquire more customers, which means your cost of customer acquisition goes down, which means your bottom line improves. Yeah, so for two strong reasons, you need to consider engagement and nurturing: A, improve top line, and B, improve bottom line. Another quick pro tip, a question that I'm often asked is, how long should I continue with my engagement and nurture efforts? Which again is important. You've got to think of this as a relay race, right? With the marketing team running with the baton for the first 3 quarters of the race and then handing it off to the salesperson during the home stretch for them to close the sale. So approximately 3 quarters of your sales life cycle, you should have your engagement and nurture efforts going out. So in the simply an example, it's a month, right? Which is why we sent it out for approximately 60 to 70%, approximately 20 days. That's how long the engagement and nurture efforts ran for. In that case, it would have been silly on my part if I had sent Trupti 5 emails in 2 days. She would have marked me as spam and unsubscribed, right? Or if I had sent her 1 email every month, that would have been the other end of the spectrum. She would have probably gone with the competitor. But if you're, say, Infosys, you're operating in the B2B space, where your sales life cycles are 12 months, 24 months, etc., you're probably better off sending 1 email every month, right? And I just wanted to get there. Following the simply an example would have been a bad idea. So think about it. So you've got to send your marketing communication out, your engagement and nurture efforts out for approximately 3 quarters of your sales life cycle. Moving on, we're almost down to the end of the session. I'm going to focus on a couple of topics. One which is very close to both of which are very close to my heart. The first one is on driving repeat business, repeat dhanda. And I'm going to talk to you about a failure story first. This was when, more than a decade ago, when I used to take care of both product and digital marketing for what was back then India's leading ethnic wear marketplace. We used to sell saris, kurtis, kurtas, Indian ethnic wear. Right, lehengas, sherwanis, etc., primarily to the diaspora, Indian NRIs living abroad. And the product market fit and the USP of the platform was we used to customize the products, stitch it in India here, basis the body measurements and the requirements of the NRI living abroad. And obviously, the NRI living abroad doesn't have access to high quality Indian tailoring, unlike in India where you've got a good Indian tailor in every street. So if you're living in a Toronto or Detroit, New Zealand, etc., you don't have access. And that was the the market need that this platform was actually fulfilling. This was before Amazon and Flipkart launched their own lines of Indian ethnic wear. So this was and still continues to be, by the way, a stable, healthy business, strong EBITDA, strong gross margins, good cash flows, etc. But problem was it had very low repeats. So people would buy very high ASPs, average selling prices. People would buy a $600, $700, $800 lehenga or a sherwani for a wedding or for a festival like Eid or Diwali or Navratri or a Christmas, New Year, etc. But they would disappear for 3 years, never to come back, which was a big problem. So when we were looking to raise funds for our next round of growth from venture capitalists, a lot of VCs found the business to be inherently risky, because they felt customers were coming in through one door and leaving through the other, never to come back. There was no stickiness built onto the platform. So the business was very dependent on new acquisitions only, which was a problem, right? And we really couldn't turn this around. So while the business still continues to do well, it still continues to make its own money, unlike a lot of e-com unicorns in the country, by the way. But it has never been able to achieve the kind of hockey stick growth that a lot of people aspire towards. Now, fast forward several years at Simplilearn, we were, I had a sense of deja vu, filled with a very, faced a very similar problem, wherein, Simplilearn is ASP's average selling price of 15,000-20,000 bucks, which is fairly high in the Indian context. Strong gross margin, strong EBITDAs, but low repeats again, because it's intuitive, right? If I've just convinced Trupti to spend 20,000 rupees of her hard-earned money on a digital marketing program, it's going to be a pretty difficult conversation for me to convince her to spend another 20,000 bucks in another course, right? But we solved this year. We turned this around successfully by pivoting the brand to focus on the narrative that we are not just a training provider. I'm not just a training provider for Trupti, but I'm a career planner, right? And Trupti here is a learning path that I have created just for you. So Trupti, you're here at the base of this mountain, right? You've just completed one course. You are at base camp A. You want to reach this peak, which is your aspirational CMO role, Chief Marketing Officer role, or Chief Data Scientist role, right? That's where you want to go. And for getting there, you need to complete these 2-3 other courses to actually get there, right? And so we essentially, it's a bundled offering, but we pitched it as the concept of a learning path. And the fact that my relationship with my end customer is not just a transactional one, but I'm here as a long-term career planner for that particular customer. This drove a lot of repeat behavior, right? So people were not just buying a particular course, but they were consuming the learning path value prop. So we're buying multiple courses. We targeted a lot of specific users, through a lot of repeat drip communication in this case, and over 3 successive quarters from virtually zero contribution to month-on-month revenues from existing customers, that increased to almost 15%, which is completely incremental ground-up growth coming from existing customers. Now, let's talk about, something which is very philosophical. There are like 3 high-level ways in which you can create, exposure for your brand. And we're going to talk about all 3. Let's try and understand that with a simple example again. A lot of Indian startups, Indian SMEs, they focus a lot on options 1 and 2, but not enough on option 3. I'll take you through what each of these 3 are. Let's say that Trupti runs a company. She has a Facebook page. It has 100 followers, right? And Trupti's team makes a post. All 100 of them end up seeing it. Now, this is referred to as owned media exposure, her exposure to her own band of followers. Of course, this is theoretical. All of us know that organic reach is never 100% on Facebook. In fact, it starts going down. Mark Zuckerberg has gone on record saying that organic reach will tend to 0 as you grow, which means that when Trupti has 100 followers, she makes a post, say 70 of them end up seeing it. When she has 10,000 followers, she makes a post, 4,000 of them might end up seeing it. When she has 100,000 followers, she makes a post, 10,000 of them might end up seeing it. That's Facebook's own way of pushing you to start spending money on the platform. Yeah, but in this case, for simplicity's sake, let's assume all 100 of them end up seeing it. This is referred to as owned media. Now, Trupti decides to spend money, and it's not a one-on-one correlation. She spends 10,000 bucks, but for this example, it's just been simplified. She gets incremental exposure to, say, 10,000 eyeballs, which is referred to as paid media. Now, there is the third form of media creation, exposure creation, which is even more powerful, right? Which can drive a lot more trust, credibility, and gets very close to this holy grail of virality, right? The much abused V word in marketing, which is virality. And which is this, right? Trupti's team doesn't spend any money in promoting, but the content that they created was so good that out of the 100 followers, 50 of them ended up resharing it. And each of them had 100 followers each. So Trupti's brand has now got exposure to 50 multiplied by 100, 5,000 incremental people which are not her own. So it's not owned media. It's not something that they have paid for. It's not paid exposure, but something that they have earned through the strength of their content. So social media shares are a great way for you to drive earned media. There are other ways as well. For example, PR is a great way. Organic editorial PR. Let's say Trupti gets featured in an interview in the Economic Times. Now she's got exposure to Economic Times readership, which is not her own, which is not own media. She's not paid for it. It's not an advertisement or an advertorial. It's just pure editorial coverage, which is like a great but something that Trupti's team has earned, Trupti's brand has earned through the strength of the work that they've actually done. Another way for you to create earned media is, of course, customer referrals. The other one is third-party discussion forums. Let's say there is a discussion happening on Quora with 10,000 views, where an entrepreneur is asking questions on how do I know which is the best payment gateway provider for my website. Right now, as a brand at Razorpay, I have the opportunity to inject myself into that conversation in a very non-salesy, seamless fashion, and by adding value. Right now, I gain exposure to all of those 10,000 views which are there on that particular thread, and which are not my own. So it's not own media. I'm not running Quora ads. It's not paid media, but something that I've earned through the strength, intelligence, and timing of my intervention. Now, if you're talking about social media shares, also wanted to talk a little about, Twitter hashtag trending activities. At Razorpay, we've done hashtag trending activities on Twitter around hashtag unlock growth, where we try to crowdsource from the Twitterati what are their plans for unlocking growth in the post-pandemic new world order. At Healthify again, we've done hashtag New Year resolution, where we try to crowdsource from the Twitterati again, what are their plans for, what are their New Year resolution plans, health plans at the start of the new year. Simply Learn again, we've done something similar, hashtag career wish. But if you're talking about earned media virality, we should certainly talk about what was probably one of the earliest instances of something going viral in India, which was the famous Kolaveri D song. While a lot of us would be aware of the song itself, not a lot of us are aware of some of the inner backroom workings that went into making the song the viral phenomenon that it actually became. Take a look at this video, which will give you a sneak peek.
How much money do you think is required to make a song world super hit? 10 million? 20 million? We spent zero. Close the mouth. I'll tell you how. First, we shot the making of the song and then added subtitles for all the non-Tamilians. Then the most important, we added the collar ringback tone code for making some pocket money. We then put up the video on our YouTube channel and then feeded it on social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter. To get the audience watching and talking about our song, we created a hook, hashtag why this Kolaveri D, which is a commonly used phrase in my state, Tamil Nadu, when somebody irritates you. Next 3 days, full tweeting different irritating situations with the hashtag why this Kolaveri D, but we also added the link to our song with it. So people who could relate to that irritating situation clicked on the link, watched the song and forgot their irritation. They also understood the usage of the question why this Kolaveri D, and then they started tweeting about things which frustrated them with the hashtag and also added the link to our song. Basically, people love venting their frustration on social media, and we use this insight to get hashtag Kolaveri trending on Twitter over 3 full days. Even people like Amitabh Bachchan ji and Anand Mahindra ji tweeted. The YouTube views kept on increasing. People were viewing, sharing. More than 41 million views across 220 countries. People love to ape a trend. So we put up a candid video of our own people singing the song in chorus, following which hundreds of people put in their own versions. Some even organized flash mobs, not just in India, even Netherlands and New Zealand. Oh, and by the way, the total collar ringback tones downloaded was 2 million and still counting. This brought us so much revenue that we are still counting actually. Okay, the enormous online buzz pushed even TV and print media to talk about the song. Articles were written on blogs, tabloids and even newspapers. It was featured in news channels and music channels. Every radio station in the country played Kolaveri. In simple words, earned media is estimated to be more than 67 million rupees only. Money spent, zero. Mission accomplished.
That's a pretty, an interesting video. But let's play a quick game of truth or dare. There's actually one thing this person has said which is actually not quite the truth, and one thing which is actually the truth. Any guesses on what that might be? The fact that they've spent zero is actually not quite the truth. I know for a fact there was some initial money that was spent, but the intelligent thing there was they didn't spend it in very overt forms of obvious advertising. That was something which is very interesting. They spent it very intelligently in subtle, more covert forms of advertising, like influencer marketing, like seeding the content in specific communities, etc., and waited for the content to gain that critical mass of exposure. After which, given that the content was inherently viral, social media shares took over and the crowd took over, and earned media took over. So they could shut off paid marketing at that end. And earned media eventually became much larger than paid media. And that's what happened in this case. And that's what happened in the case of Gangnam Style as well, which was a global viral phenomenon. And of course, the truth is the hashtag why this celebrity, which made their product relevant to the masses. And for something to go viral, it's almost like a rocket looking to escape from Earth's gravitational pull. It needs to reach that minimum escape velocity, after which it can actually fly free. Yeah, and that's true for virality as well. That's all I had for you. Thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed myself. I hope this was value additive and this was a productive use of your time. Would love to take any questions that might be there. Back to you, Trupti.
Thank you so much, Veda. I think it was a very interesting session, and I love that my name was called out so many times, and it was not about muting and unmuting you. So thank you so much for that. I do see a lot of questions. So would you want me to pick up, or would you
I can just go through the questions on the,
I think please take over.
Sure. Let me just see. Yeah, Harmanpreet, there were more Play Store searches than browser searches. That's actually true. Harmanpreet's next question is on SEO. Is it still a viable strategy in 2021 given a small brand? Absolutely, Harmanpreet. But the thing is that if you use SEO, Harman, what you've got to do is you need to also subscribe for some kind of a strong analytics tool. I would recommend a tool like an Ubersuggest. I'm just going to type out some names here, Harman. Ubersuggest, SEMrush, and of course, good old Moz.com. These are some of the best tools which are out there when it comes to SEO and SEO analytics. So choose keywords where you have a good chance of winning. So for example, if you're already operating in a space which is fairly crowded and you've got a lot of established players who are already ranking on page 1 for some of the core keywords, these platforms also give you a sense of ranking difficulty, not just the keyword search volumes. So there's no point in you banging your head against a wall and going after impossible to rank keywords. It's going to take you maybe 2-3 years to achieve results. So focus on keywords, which is what Thrillophilia did, if you think about it, right? They focused on long tail keywords, which don't have a lot of search volumes, but a broad set of these long tail keywords. So in conjunction, if you think of them, they work really well. While each individual keyword might not have a lot of broad search volume, they focused on a long tail set of keywords. It's almost like a flanking strategy, right? If you're in a battle, you know that you can't take your enemy head on because your army is too small. So you have this flanking approach where you try to, attack your competition from the side. And that's what Thrillophilia did. And that will be my recommendation if you're an early stage startup. I hope that helps, Harman. Wish you all the best. I think somebody else has a question. Shraddha has a question. Is Facebook still relevant? I mean, organic reach on Facebook is fairly low, Shraddha. You're right, if that's your question. But from an advertising perspective, Facebook can still drive growth, like I mentioned in the Healthify example. So if you're operating in a category such as that, right, which has a very strong personal connect, then Facebook can still work. Or fashion, right, which is very involved purchase, Facebook can still work. Yeah, hope that helps. Yeah, Bashish making an observation. I think one person has a question on how to increase marketing video engagement organically on digital platforms. I think the idea is to create, if you're creating a video, don't make it too long. And one of the things for you to do is, especially some 101 tips, if you want to make an engaging video, is to start off with your hero narrative. Start off with something big. Start off with a bold statement, something which is big, bold, and punchy right at the beginning that arrests the user's attention. Because most of the drop-off, 90-95% of the drop-offs for any video happen within the first 5 seconds. So you need to arrest the user's attention within those first 5 seconds. There's no point in you delaying, building up to a suspense and delaying your hero narrative announcement towards the end, right? And so make sure that you make that big attention grabbing announcement right up front, right? That is something which is very important. Try to keep your video, short, sharp, focused, talk about customer benefits, not so much about your features. And it always doesn't have to be salesy, right? You can also create videos that inform, that educate, that add value to your prospects' lives, which also builds a lot of engagement. I think Ashish has a question. How do you target pharma marketers in India for our digital marketing solutions? I think if you're targeting marketers, Ashish, I'm assuming a lot of these are white collar working professionals, should be fairly active on LinkedIn. So I would say LinkedIn could be a good choice for you. If there is a specific designation or an industry that you can go after, that's something which you could do. If you have a list of target named accounts that you want to go after, within which these people actually work in, you can also put in those list of accounts, and you can do an ABM, account-based marketing campaign on LinkedIn, targeting specifically these people having a particular designation working in these companies. You don't have to waste money anywhere else. Yeah. Bhavesh has a question. Let me just read through. It's a long one. Okay, Bhavesh is building a website on Wix. which has limited SEO capabilities? Is there any other way to increase lead generation through the digital way? I think Wix is all right, Bhavesh. I think what you could also think is Shopify could be another interesting option for you to consider. That's something for you to consider, but Wix is not too bad, right? I mean, at least for you to get started during your early days, it does provide the basic to SEO toolkit elements. And that coupled with the strategy that I mentioned, which I think is something that all early stage bootstrap, I'm assuming you are bootstrapped in your early stage. I apologize if that assumption is wrong, but assuming that you're early stage and bootstrapped, I think you've got to look at the flanking strategy that I mentioned, wherein you focus on long tail of keywords, where the ranking difficulty is medium to low. It's not extremely high. So which doesn't leave you frustrated that after three years of SEO effort, you've landed nowhere. You've not in page one on anything. So the approach that Thrilophilia adopted in a space which was, they were surrounded by large players, MNCs and homegrown Indian biggies, etc., but they still managed to survive and grow. So that will be my suggestion to you, Bhavesh. Pratik has a question: how much do you spend? That's the $1 million question that I'm often asked on how much do you spend. If I had a penny, if I had a paisa for every time that question was asked, I would probably be a millionaire by now. But I think that the answer to that is fairly layered, Pratik. And in the new digital world that we operate in, you can start with as low as 5,000 rupees. And but more importantly, you've got to have a clear sense of what are your lead indicators for success. Let's say in the Healthify case, right? Our sales life cycles are 4 weeks. Now, if I start a new campaign and I spend, say, a couple of lakhs in a new campaign, I can't wait 4 weeks to know if my campaign is working well or not. I need, which is a lag indicator, right? Conversion. I need to have some kind of lead indicator which gives me advanced information as to whether the campaign is working well, is trending in the right direction, which essentially is through app engagement rate, app uninstall rate, right? Are people spending time on the app who are coming in through this new campaign, right? This gives me advanced signals, right? The quality, which tells me that the quality of people coming in through my new campaign, are they good, bad, ugly? So in a very similar fashion, you can start with as low as $5,000. Look at some of these lead indicators to know if your campaign is trending in the right direction. You don't have to wait for your entire sales life cycle to finish. And the other thing which you should also do is spend enough to make sure that you're able to get your initial set of early adopter customers, which can validate or challenge your product market fit assumptions. So if you're a B2C company, I would say, this is not very scientific, but based on my experience, I would say early adopter customers for you to validate your PMF and POC assumptions would be around 100, right? So spend enough to get that initial set of 100 leads so you can work on those leads and try to see if your product is good enough to convert. Shut off the spends after you get that initial set of 100 leads. Likewise, if you're B2B, 5 could be a good number, right? Get 5 leads and try to test your hypothesis on those 5. Shut off the spends. So spend enough to get that. If you're a B2C company, get those first 100 leads to sign up, and those 5 if you're a B2B company to actually sign up. I hope that helps, Pratik. Wish you all the best. Recommendation on courses, Harman has, is asking. I think there are multiple ones, and being ex-Simplilearn myself, Simplilearn is a good place. But my suggestion, Harman, is there is a lot of great free stuff available on the internet, and there is no better guide than rolling up your sleeves yourself and getting into the thick of things. There is so much of free information available on the internet, high quality information. Udemy has tons of high quality information. Personally, I follow 2-3 blogs, from a digital marketing perspective. There is, of course, good old Neil Patel, right? Who's like a great, probably the world's #1 resident expert when it comes to SEO. There is, of course, Guy Kawasaki, whom I really follow on all things there, not just digital marketing, business strategy, etc. And then there is Avinash Kaushik. I follow all of these guys and their blogs, etc. The other thing which I also, a book that I would recommend is Lost and Founder, written by Moz.com founder, which is a fantastic book, which again helps you, understand the travails of a startup founder and gives you a sneak peek into a lot of the nuts and bolts of the workings of digital marketing and content. Let me just see if there are other questions. How to improve intent in B2C leads and form. I think Shloka, you can follow the suggestion that I gave on B2B. I think that also applies for B2C. Wherein you can artificially inject friction. Do not just resort to defaulting things. Try to the extent possible not to default if you want to optimize for intent. So Pratik's question is, at what point should you build an internal team versus relying on agencies? I would say right upfront, right early, because digital marketing is no longer a sideshow. It can't be a side project. It is core to the company. So as long as you need that expertise in-house. So if you can do it yourself, or if you can hire interns or full-time employees who can do it for you internally within the company, that is something which would be that's something that I would recommend. inside out marketing, inside out targeting is what I meant, Manoj. So inside out targeting, what I meant was, the traditional form of targeting is I say that through my consumer research, millennial is my target customer, and I create campaigns going after that segment. The new form of targeting is I let people come in and I let data and behavior on my platform and the feedback that goes to that platform again, right? It goes to the advertising programmatic platform like a Facebook or Google, validate or challenge my original targeting hypothesis, right? In the Healthify example, like I said, we started off by saying millennial is my target customer. Turns out it was the older people. People who are older than millennials who are converting better because this feedback loop was continuously going. The millennials were not converting. So that feedback was going to Google, but the older people were converting. That feedback was going to Google continuously, and Google was trying to find more clones of these older people and not more clones of millennials because the older guys were converting better. That's what I meant by inside out targeting, wherein you're actually looking at data points from within your application actually dictate whom you should target outside. Yeah. When to use push versus pull marketing, Ajay, I think it again comes to Google search is pull, Facebook is push. I think you can use the same framework that I mentioned earlier. If you've got enough search volumes for core keywords related to your category, if you're operating in a fairly mass space, then you can rely on pull. If you're not in that kind of a space, you will have to push, of course, where user behavior is not set. Suresh's question is, should I focus on brand awareness or acquiring customers? I would say both. It can never be an either or. And if you're an extremely early stage startup, I think you've got to first get that, as I said, initial set of early adopter leads who can validate your PMF assumptions. Yeah. Are there any other $0 marketing methods other than these? I would say, Gopal, SEO, of course, and earned media, focusing on content, like the examples that I gave of Thrillophilia, of Practo, and creating viral content, right, which can potentially go viral. And viral is a moonshot, right? And anybody who says they know how to create viral content is lying. I don't think there is a codified rule book that says this is how we can actually go about creating viral content. But just focusing a lot on SEO, high quality content, and earned media, I think that to me would be a $0 marketing idea. For EdTech, Kiran's question is, what else would you recommend? It depends on what kind of EdTech. If you're selling to schools, I would say events and channel partnership. That's primarily the one because it's an extremely tough sell. I don't think digital is the answer. You need a more high touch intervention, or you need to work with a channel partner who already has that network with the schools, with the school principals and the trustees and the board, etc. That is the only way to crack the space. I don't really think digital is the answer. Not a lot of school principals are on, say, a LinkedIn, for example. There are other options, of course, on digital, but they're not going to be very ROI, effective or ROI focused. How do you find app and uninstall rate? So there are a couple of, mobile marketing analytics platforms. It used to be a duopoly till recently. There was a platform called AppSolar and there was another platform called AppsFlyer. This duopoly was broken and another player called Branch broke into the space almost 3-4 years ago, and they took over the entire market. They took over China. They took over a lot of companies in India as well. A lot of companies went over to Branch. So I would recommend one of these if you've got the money to spend. Branch is more value for money. It's cheaper. Which also gives you data on app uninstall rate. But if you don't have the money to spend, of course, the good old fashioned Google Analytics SDK for mobile apps, that is also something that you can use, which can give you that information. What can be done for personal brands? Dishant has a question. Yoga teacher and a physiotherapist. How do I spread the website? I think, Dishant, in this case, your space is also very similar to the Healthify case. Your wife is operating in a space which is on health and wellness, about people losing weight, discovering healthier and fitter versions of themselves, improving mental balance, calmness, etc. Right? Very close to the personal identity of the individual. So I would say Facebook should work well if you've got the money to spend. Otherwise, I would say get your initial set of early adopter customers, have a subscription and a referral plan in place. So instead of spending money on Facebook and Google, you can give it to your existing customers, right? That's something which you can do. And just leverage on your network of networks, and earn media creation to build word of mouth. If you've got the money to spend, I would say Facebook. I think Krishna has a question. Am I a freelancer or am I committed to Razorpay? I wear 3 hats today in life, Krishna. One is I take care of I have a full-time job where I take care of the startup and the SME practice at Razorpay. I take care of both marketing and sales. The second hat that I also wear is I serve as an adjunct visiting faculty member in marketing at quite a few IIMs, Bangalore, Indore, Kashipur, etc., where I conduct these programs. Then the third hat that I wear is I serve as a marketing mentor working various startup acceleration programs, various TIE chapters, Adult Innovation Mission, Head Start, etc. Yeah, I hope that helps. Yeah, the deck, I think I'll share it with Trupti right after this. She should be able to send it across. B2B lead gen using LinkedIn. Should I use paid or use the LinkedIn sales platform? It depends. You can do multiple things. I think the question from the gentleman Kushal is, should I use the LinkedIn sales navigator or should I just spend money on LinkedIn? I think you can use a combination of both. It depends on what kind of a product. If you are in high-end B2B, and if you've got a large enough sales team, maybe the sales navigator may not necessarily work. If you're talking to some people who are extremely senior, cold outreaches by the sales folks may not necessarily work. You need that overlay of marketing intervention. So you probably need to generate, marketing needs to generate the lead, and an inbound lead needs to come in for the sales team to convert. A direct cold outbound outreach may not necessarily work. But if you're selling to people who are, say, selling to people who are not very senior, right? People who are, say, at a manager level, senior manager level or below, slightly more junior folks. In that case, sales navigator could still work. Yeah, I hope that helps. How much time does it take to get returns? Sahaj, like I said, it depends on, for example, you don't have to wait for your sales life cycle. At Healthify, I could know, while my returns would take 4 weeks because my sales life cycle is 4 weeks. If I launch a new campaign, I can look for lead indicators which can give me information in either real time or within 24 hours. Yeah, so you've got to do that. Any scope for SMS marketing? I think there is still scope, Ruchika. I mean, which is a very unpopular statement. No marketer worth their salt likes to admit that SMS marketing works because it appears very unglamorous. It appears very spammy, but it works. Especially if you've got a jaw-dropping offer in place. If you've got a really strong offer, right? Like a Flipkart Big Billion Day sale or like an Amazon sale, which is happening. In one of my earlier organizations, we used to have a flash sale every Thursday for 4 hours. In such cases, the SMS work really well because the cost of sending an SMS is also extremely cheap. But the offer needs to be, an extremely strong one. Influencer marketing, Harman, I would say it's more like pasta, pizza. It's not like your roti, not like your roti chawal dal. So you can use it as a force amplifier. You've got to think of your marketing channels. You have forces and you've got force amplifiers. Your force channels are those which are like your Rahul Dravids, which are your consistent run getters, which can keep getting you, keep driving acquisitions and customers in Danda in a regular, predictable fashion. Your force amplifiers are like your Virendra Sehwaks, who will help your forces work better. They won't directly drive attribution. Influencer marketing is like that. You could think of it if you're not able to drive incremental ROI using performance, using paid marketing, but I wouldn't recommend it at a very early stage. Rishi has a question. What is the best way to scale a 2-year-old online business from 1,000 to 5,000 customers? Mattress business. Interesting. So I think, Rishi, you can use the same construct that I mentioned earlier. Check out the Google keyword. I don't know this category well enough, so you are the expert here. But check out the Google keyword planner. Figure out if there are enough search volumes for your keyword already. If so, focus your energies more on that space. If not, if it's still fairly niche, there is not a lot of user search, behavior pattern, then you focus more on Facebook. But wherever you decide to spend money, one thing that you should do is keep creating high quality content. Have a blog, a thriving blog where you keep putting out high quality content, specifically focusing on keywords which are relevant to your end customer. Even if it is not directly related to your business, focus on keywords which have much higher keyword demand patterns, like generic health. How do you sleep well? Benefits of sleeping well, right? Dangers of various kinds of sleeping disorders, dangers of insomnia, for example, which have much higher keyword demand. It's got nothing to do with your business. It is slightly neighboring to the space that you're operating in, but relevant to your customer. Right, so that's something which you can create content on. I hope that helps, Rishi. Wish you all the best. Sagar has a question: any strategy for global roles, global placement, overseas recruitments? I think a similar approach, Sagar. Look at the keyword search volumes. If there is a lot of volume, then focus on Google. Else, focus on Facebook. I think for the next question also same answer applies. Shailendra has a question: creating a platform for two-wheeler owners and riders. 12,000 customers are there. I don't know. I'm assuming this is a marketplace, Shailendra. I'm not able to understand this fully. So if it's a marketplace, your question is how do you grow this, right? On the one side, you have owners, on the other side, you've got riders, I'm assuming. Customers that deliver safety. Okay, I'm assuming that's what this is. So if that is the case, I think you've got to get more supply first. You've got to get more two-wheelers on the platform, more owners on the platform. And I think the demand will follow. That will be my suggestion. So any marketplace, if you're looking to build it up, build supply first. That's what the resident knowledge says, and then the demand will follow. That's what I would recommend. I think next question, how can I get better quality ads from my agency? So choose the right agency, Shloka, and give them a watertight brief. That will be my suggestion. And I think the brief is very important. If you're working with an agency, a lot of agencies, they don't necessarily have a strong enough brief, and more importantly, don't understand the business and the target customer well enough, which is probably the reason why they tend to operate in a vacuum. So as long as you can ensure that you set them up for success, then the quality of their outputs will be a lot better. Healthy snacking for kids, Harman. Again, very similar one, Harman. I would say it's again very similar to the space that a healthy family operates in. I think Facebook would be a good go-to place if you've got the money to spend. Otherwise, focus on creating a lot of content. If you're not in a hurry to grow, right? If you're okay to grow slow, focus on content, SEO, and earned media creation, network of networks, referrals, etc. Any ideas for health tech? Social media has limited success. Arun, again, customer referrals I think are a great way for you to drive acquisitions. So you need to have a strong enough referral program if you're not seeing a lot of success from social media. And on social media, again, I think Facebook and Instagram, if you're running, focus more on video. If you're running static ads, it's not really going to work. Facebook's algorithm optimizes more for video, content delivery, because that is more engaging on the platform. So that'll be my suggestion. Referrals plus, of course, focusing more on video content with the hero message being delivered really, really early. Otherwise, people are just going to slip over to the, skip across to the next video. I think Seema has a question. How do you develop a category which is micro niche like parenting? Parents for type 1 kids. I think in this case, Seema, this seems bang on for the second category that I mentioned, right? Which is niche. This is niche, as you correctly pointed out, but high on personal connect and emotional connect. I think this can strike a very strong emotional chord with people. So I think Facebook needs to be a go-to place. Of course, apart from creating, which is an all-season plan, creating content, focusing on earned media, etc. Successful brief for an agency, I think making sure that the agency has a strong enough understanding of the objectives of the campaign, who the target customer is, and has a strong enough context of the business. These are the three things that you should talk about. I think that's pretty much it. Trupti, all of the questions are done. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Veda. I think this was a wonderful session. There was a bit of glitch on Zoom. So after the session, we will be sending across the recording, which we are uploading on YouTube so people can access to that. We also went live on Facebook. So anyone missed it, they can obviously have a look at that. And please write to us at naveen.raju@tiemumbai.org. And looking forward to hosting you again, Veda. Thank you so much. I do see a lot of people who are writing to us. So Veda, could I just request you to leave, your contact details in the chat so people can pick it up? That would be wonderful.
Yeah, so I have a pretty unique name, Trupti. So I should be fairly easy to find on LinkedIn. People can talk to me on LinkedIn, or I'll also give you my...
Your LinkedIn details were anyways put across on our emailer. So people, if you are comfortable, people can write to you on LinkedIn. Yeah,
feel free to ping me there. Feel free to connect with me there. More than happy to, change notes.
Thank you so much, Veda.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me over, Trupti, and to Time Mumbai. Thanks for having me over, and wish everybody good health. Stay safe, take care, and wishing you all success in your business.
Thank you, Veda. Looking forward to hosting you again sometime very soon.
Absolutely. Sure.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. We have a lot of sessions coming up. So just please follow us on social media for more details. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.